Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, The Quality Analyst. So far in this Selenium series, we have learned ID, name, class name, link text, partial link text and even XPath locators. So which are extremely powerful. Now today we are starting something that is just as important as XPath, and that is CSS selectors. So let me say this clearly. If XPath is the brain of Selenium, CSS selector is the speed of Selenium. Okay. So CSS selectors are faster, cleaner, and very widely used in modern automation frameworks. So in fact, many companies today prefer CSS selectors over XPath wherever possible. So in today's session, we are going to understand CSS selectors from scratch. We will talk about how CSS selectors work, how Selenium uses them, and most importantly, how to write them correctly. So don't rush, don't memorize at all, just understand the logic. Okay, all right, then let's begin. So before Selenium or before automation, CSS selectors already existed. They were created for styling web pages. Developers use CSS selectors to tell the browser apply this XYZ style to this XYZ element. Okay, so Selenium simply reuses that same concept to locate the element. So wherever you write a CSS selector in Selenium, you are basically saying, hey browser, find this element the same way CSS finds it. Okay, and that's why CSS selectors are very fast, very optimized, and very reliable. Okay, so before we go into the individual examples, let me first give you a high level overview of the different types of CSS selectors that we commonly use in Selenium. So let me open the Excel here. Okay, I have this like CSS selector types defined here. Okay, so at the most basic level, CSS selector allow us to identify the element based on ID, class, tag name, and attributes. Okay, so the first type is the ID selector. Okay, this selector uses the ID of an element, and since the IDs are expected to be unique, this is the most reliable and fastest selectors we have. Okay, the second type is class selector. Okay, so class selectors are used when multiple elements share the same class name, because classes are not unique, they are flexible but must be used carefully. Okay, and the third type is tag selector. Tag selectors locate element using their HTML tag names such as input, button, or anchor, and on their own tag selectors are very generic, but they are very useful when combined with other selectors. Okay, the next we have combinations such as tag plus class and tag plus ID. Okay, so these combinations help us make selectors more precise and readable by narrowing down the element we want. And then we have the attribute selectors. Attribute selectors allow us to locate the elements using attribute value pairs such as name, type, or placeholder. So these selectors are extremely useful in real world applications where IDs are missing or dynamic. Okay? And the last one is finally we have multiple attribute selectors. So here we apply more than one attribute condition to the same element, making the selector very specific and reducing the ambiguity. So overall, CSS selectors range from very simple and fast like ID selectors to more flexible and precise selectors like attribute based and combined selectors. So as an automation engineer, your goal is to always choose a selector that is stable, readable, and easy to maintain. And we will take them one by one. Okay, so let's start with the most powerful and the safest selector, that is CSS with ID. Okay, so in HTML, an ID is supposed to be unique. Okay, so let's open the practice page which we have created. Okay, and then we can simply let's inspect this page, inspect this text field here. Okay, and then you see there is ID. Okay, so now for this the ID seems to be unique, that is principal. So in CSS selectors, if we like, if you want to write the CSS selector for this, what we can do is we can simply do Control F, and then we can simply add hash, and then we can add the principal. Okay, and then now you see, with a simple hash and the attribute ID. So for ID we can use this hash. Okay, and then we can simply add the ID attribute value, and then we are able to locate the element. Okay, so this is very easy. Okay, and then like we are able to locate the element. Okay, so no tag name is needed, or no extra syntax, just hash followed by a ID value, ID attribute value. Okay, so let's say for example, if you want to do it in a Selenium, then what we can do is, you can, let me open the same example, and then here we will write CSS Selector. Okay, so here what we can do, go to driver dot find element, and then by dot CSS Selector. So instead of others, we can select CSS Selector, and then we can simply pass that particular CSS Selector which we have written to locate this element. Okay, so just add it, and this will work just fine. Okay, and then maybe what again, we can do the same thing, and then let's assume we are adding some principal here. So this is how we write the CSS selector by using the ID attribute. Okay, so now let me tell you something important. If an element has a stable ID, this should be your first choice, because it's fast, it's readable, and it's almost never breaks. Okay, so remember, ID selector using hash is the best case scenario in CSS selector. So again, if you want to write it, let's say if you still want to write the tag name, okay, if you want to make it more readable, your Selenium code more readable, what you can do is you can simply add tag name here, and that will also work just fine. You can just add input, hash, and principal, but logically no need to write that tag name. Even if it is ID, simply add hash and the ID attribute value. Okay, so the next is CSS selector using CSS selector using class selectors. Okay, so classes are very common in HTML, but they come with a simple, like some rules. Okay, so look at the example, this login. Okay, if I will open this login page. Okay, so for this login, it's not the one, okay, which we are looking for. There is one more we have added here just for the demonstration purpose, because the other login buttons doesn't have the class. Okay, so these are the class name locator practice. Okay, so what we can do is we can just simply navigate, and then we can locate this. So if you see the second option, the second login button, that is having the class login here. Okay, so in CSS selector, the class is represented using the dot. Okay, so like in case of ID we are using hash, we can simply use login for for the class name representation. Okay, so just get this login attribute value, the class attribute value. Okay, and then again Control F, and then instead of hash, just add the dot and then login, and then you see you are able to locate the element. Okay, and again in our code, you can simply pass the same thing. So driver dot find element by dot CSS selector, and then what we can do is we can simply pass here the login dot login. Okay, so this is for the class locator. Okay, and then not this one, like basically as it is a button, we will click it. Okay, so this is very simple, right? So now let's talk about something very important. So what if the element has multiple classes? Okay, so we have one more example for this sign in button. Okay, again, if you want to locate, you can locate. So you see the class name is submit sign in button. So basically, it is not one class, it has two classes. So one is submit and second one is sign in button. Okay, so now listen carefully. In CSS selector, you never write class space with spaces. Okay, in the CSS selector, it will not work. Okay, so let's say, for example, if you try to write like this, it will not work. So dot and then this, it will not work. It will give you zero element. Okay, so instead, what we can do is we can use at least one class out of it. You see, we have used sign in button and then we are able to locate the element. And then simply also you can try to use the submit button again, but as this seems to be more generic name, that is submit. So again, but for our page it is still unique, so we can use that. But if it is not unique, then we should not use submit also, because it seems to be more generic. Okay, or else if you want to write with the both classes, then what you can do is you can simply add dot and then the submit, and then again the space you need to replace with the dot. So again in this case it will work, and then you see the element is located. Okay, so the rule is each class gets its own dot. Okay, so this is one of the most common mistakes beginners make. So remember, spaces break class name. Okay, uh, dots connect class selector. So always replace the space with the dot to make it work, or else you can simply use one class name here. So that should work. Again, based on the uniqueness, you can try to get the exact name from the particular class name. Okay, then it will work fine. Okay, so this is about the class name. Next comes tag selectors. So every HTML element has a tag name. Okay, so if you see there are button, you see this is a button. Okay, then there are some div tags. Okay, then there are some input tags. Okay, there are some anchor tags, span tags, and so on. So uh, let's take one example. Okay, so let's take an example. So if I simply add button here and then enter here, if you see, we can see there are 71 occurrences are there. Okay, so that means select all buttons on the page. So if you simply give button, it will select on all the buttons on the page. So like we were doing it for the XPath. If we double slash, then it will give you all the buttons. It will do say similar kind of stuff with the button as well. Okay, so but again that is not a best practice to use. Okay, because tag selectors are very generic. So if your page has 10 buttons, this selector will match all the 10. Okay, and that's why tag selectors are very rarely used alone. Okay, so instead we use combined tag with a class or attribute, and which you will see in a moment. Okay, so next is now like we will see about the CSS selectors with attribute. Okay, so the attribute selectors allow us to locate elements based on any HTML attribute. Okay, so look at some input field. Okay, maybe there is one more example we have. Okay, so if you see the show message button, so just inspect this button here, and now you see there is a button tag. Okay, and then the type is button, name attribute is show message button, and then again the enclose text is show message, and the closing tag is there. Okay, so if you want to locate this using CSS selector, what we can write is we can add the button and then we can take help of the attribute. Okay, so what I will do is I will use the name attribute. Okay, so simply add button here, and then what I will do is I will just add name. So no need to add any @ for CSS selector. Okay, it will work just fine. Okay, now you see, if you just select button name, and it will give you show message button, and we are able to successfully locate the particular element. Okay, so button is the tag and name is equal to show message button is the attribute condition. So this is extremely useful when the ID is missing and the class is dynamic. Okay, So in that case, it's better we use this kind of thing. Okay, so now we will see another example for the class name which we were seeing earlier. Again, go to this. Okay, so now if we try to use this, let's say again, I will use the class attribute. Okay, and now you see in that case it will work just fine. But if we directly try to use it with a shortcut like dot submit sign in button, that will not work. Okay, for that we need to use the dots in place of space. Okay, or else we can use either of the classes. Okay, so there is one more way by which we can use multiple attributes for locating the element. Okay, so let's say for example, if we want to locate the particular element with multiple attributes, okay, or multiple attributes, right? So that way also we can do that. So again, but for this it's not possible because it is very unique and do not have any other attribute. So I will again choose the other show message button. So for that we have multiple attributes. Okay, again for the just demonstration purpose we can use it. Okay, so this is a button and I will use this name. Okay, let's replace this with a name, because name. And then if you want to add the multiple attributes, okay, in case of XPath we have to add and condition, but for this case it's not mandatory. You can simply add another attribute just beside this attribute. Okay, so just add a square bracket and then here add type is equal to button. So button is nothing but attribute value for type. Okay, and then this will also work just fine. You see the show message gets highlighted. Okay, so this is the way like we can use multiple attributes for locating the element. So again, this is helpful in case like you want to be a bit stricter on the CSS selector. Okay, so let me give you a professional tip. So CSS attribute selectors are cleaner than XPath, faster than XPath, and easier to maintain. Okay, and that's why many automation engineers prefer them. Okay, so now let's talk about some common mistakes. So the mistake number one, using spaces incorrectly. Okay, so which we have seen now. Mistake number two, overusing the tag selectors. So again, as mostly the tag selectors are not unique, so definitely overusing them will not help you. The mistake number three, writing very long CSS selector. Again, try to avoid longer CSS selectors, and remember shorter selectors are more stable. Okay, because the like longer the CSS selector, that there are a lot of chances of breaking it, right? So if the page gets changes, so definitely there are high chances that your CSS selector may break. Okay, so that's why it's better to have shorter selector. Okay, so your goal is not to impress, your goal is to maintain automation script. Okay, so now let me answer the big question. So when should you use CSS selector and when should you use XPath? So a good engineer knows both XPath as well as CSS selector. So there is no rule of using CSS selector and over XPath, okay, and vice versa. So you can go for both, but definitely uh, like you try to use CSS selector like over XPath. Okay, but yeah, again based on your requirement, definitely whichever fits you can go with that. But again you have to use XPath when you need parent child traversal, okay, and you need the sibling navigation. Okay, so mostly the XPath is powerful because of the XPath accesses. Okay, and then there are some text-based matching also, but yeah, again we have similar kind of features in CSS selectors as well. So again there is no such rule, okay, that you need to use CSS selector here, you need to use XPath here. You can go based on your requirement, okay, and which works for you very well. Okay, so all right, let's summarize today's session. We learned how CSS selectors work, how to use ID with hash, how to use class with dot, why tag selectors are risky, and how powerful attribute selectors are. CSS selectors are fast, clean, and CSS selectors are widely used in the real project. So in the next video, we will go deeper into advanced CSS selectors and real world automation scenarios. So make sure you practice, pause the video and try writing the selectors on your own. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next session.